So Eran, several years ago, you co-authored a guide to property rights in Alberta for the Institute. What prompted you to write that?
Back in 2009, the government had introduced the Alberta Land Stewardship Act, or ALSA, as it is commonly known, which supports the development of regional plans and integrated planning in the province. One section of that act provided that no compensation will be payable to landowners who are affected by a regional plan, and that caused quite a stir. There were those who claimed that the new legislation had taken away their property rights. And so together with my colleague David Percy, we wrote a guide to set the record straight, so to speak, and to inform the public debate over property rights in Alberta.
Okay, well, let's take a step back. What do we mean when we talk about property and property rights?
Well, these are two very difficult and loaded terms. I think that a useful way of thinking about property and property rights is in terms of whether your expectations with respect to land and other valuable things are protected by the legal system.
Protected from who?
Well, from the state and also from neighbors and strangers. For example, as a landowner, I have a right to prevent anyone from trespassing on my property, and that includes the government. But that right is not unlimited. As an owner, I also have a right to occupy my land and use it and enjoy it as I see fit. But again, that right is not unlimited.
So, on those limitations, in the guide you refer to parliamentary sovereignty and contrast it with the constitutional protection of property rights. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Every society has a tension between the need for collective action to promote the public interest on the one hand, and private interests and expectations on the other hand. In many countries, the balance between those competing demands is entrenched in some constitutional document that protects private property from the reach of the majority, usually by requiring that any taking of private property by the state meet some public use test and be accompanied by compensation to the owner. Canada does not offer such constitutional protection of private property.
So to just be clear on that point then, property rights are not included in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms or otherwise in the Canadian Constitution?
No, property rights were left out.
Okay. So where would we find it in other documents that have been foundational in our law?
Well, sometimes I get questions about the Bill of Rights or even the Magna Carta of 1215. None of these documents prevent a federal or provincial legislature from enacting laws that affect property.
So that's what you mean by parliamentary or legislative sovereignty, right? It says that the legislature can pass any laws within its jurisdiction.
That's right. We inherited this principle from the British tradition. And it means in practice that checks and balances over the legislature are political in nature. The government can do anything authorized by the legislation, and an owner has the right to compensation only insofar as provided by statute.